So, commerce, medicine, commerce, medicine, so, hi, and welcome for another historical journey back in time when Genoese Maritime Commercial Empire was at its peak from 11th to 18th century. 11th to 18th century, 11th to 18th century. Well, the Genoese Maritime Commercial Empire, like the Venice, like the Republic of Venice. How this commercial empire has been founded? Well, officially around 1005 CE as a self-governing commune, Genoa. The golden age was between 12th and 15th century, peaking after the First Crusade, when Genoa gained major privileges in the far Levant. And Genoa became one of the maritime republics, alongside Venice, Pisa, and Amalfi. But Genoa, it learned more toward finance and trade than empire building by conquest. Let's start with the core territories. Well, the core territories. First, Corsica, island of Corsica, from 1284 to 1768. The most enduring Genoese possession. Next was the far Crimea. Yes, Crimea. Keyboards, Kaffa, Tana, and Kherson, forming the Khazaria 1266 to 1475, like here. Alright, let's move to the next core territory of Genoese Maritime Empire. Sardinia. Well, first Sardinia was controlled locally, and later entirely. The main ports were Cagliari, Arborea, and Torres. Okay. But these were the core territories and colonies. How about the temporary colonies and temporia or Principali Emporial Coloni Commerciali? That means some trade ports across Europe. But first, the temporary colony in Eastern Mediterranean. There were the Aegean Islands. Chios, Lesbos, Samos, Tenedos. And after the Levant, Beirut, Acre, and Antioch. Well, the Genoese Empire, Maritime one, expanded western Mediterranean and reached Gibraltar. It was a main strategic port, well, where the goods were transported to larger ships and then sent worldwide, well, Africa mostly or Northern Europe. Besides, there were Malaga, Barcelona, and on the African coast, Tanga, Morocco and Algiers. How about economic and financial power? Genoa evolved into the bankers of Europe. Bankers of Europe. Well, bankers of Europe. They financed the Spanish Empire during the 16th and 17th century, known as the Age of Genoese. Age of Genoese. The Bank of St. George, founded in 1407, managed state debt for Rhine colonies and even governed Corsica entirely. Genoese merchants dominated mostly silver and gold trade. Silver and gold. Between Spain and its new colonies, even in Caribbean. By the late 1500s, Genoa replaced Venice as the financial capital of Europe. Well, some trade and maritime routes. Genoa's trade network spanned from Atlantic ports like Porto, which were commercial ones, Porto, Lisbona, La Rochelle, and even in the Flanders, like Bruges, across all Mediterranean, to the Black Sea, Commercial ports like Constanza, modern-day Romania, and in Crimea, also ports, the main ports, harbors in Constantinople, Thessaloniki, and Athens. The key imports were, let's write them here, coral, textiles, olive and olive oil, spices, and of course silver and gold. Well, and a special part in Genoa's maritime history were the slave trading. The slave tradings. Yes, slave trading. Because Genoa became one of Europe's leading slave trading powers, especially getting them from Crimea and Slavic regions to the main ports of the Mediterranean Sea. The longest lasting possession was Corsica, nearly 500 years, governed directly by the Bank of St. George. Corsica provided timber for ships and iron, a strong defensive positions against pirates due to the strategical location of Corsica. A true fact is that the Corsicans rebelled often during this time when they were controlled by the Genoese Empire, culminating with the Pascal Paoli revolt and the eventual sale of the islands in France 1768. And here is why Corsica is now under a French territory, because it was sold. Sardinia, well, Genoa fought with Pisa for dominance in Sardinia, controlled local mini-kingdoms called Giudicati, like a Borea, Cagliari, and Torres. These weren't colony in the classic sense, more likely client states under Genoese influence. The island ports were key for trade with North Africa and Spain mostly. We can see here the Balearic Islands, Palma, Ibiza. There were regular Genoese stops, and they held small harbors for transporting goods and passengers. Genoese merchants managed banking houses and shipyards in Palma. For the Spanish crown, well, in Valencia, they handled sugar trade and slaves. Sugar. Well, on the other side, in North Africa, Genoese had harbors or outposts in Tunis, Alger, and Tripoli. The Tabarka Islands of Tunisia became a coral fishing base. Coral fishing base. Genoese captains dominated the area and extracted resources like ivory, coral, and slaves. These bases in northern Africa were part commercial, part pirate hideouts, because Genoese entrepreneurs were flexible. The Italian mainland, Genoa itself was the common hub for every route flowed through the city's docks and merchant places along the coast of Italy. Big Genoese bankers financed Milan, Naples, even Rome and Papal States. Pisa and Venice were their eternal rivals. Pisa and Venice rivals. Marseille. Marseille and Nice oscillated between ally and competitors. The Adriatic Sea, here, Genoa maintained trading rights and consulates in the Adriatic ports under Venetian surveillance. They shipped timber, salt, and grain from the Balkans. Lesbos, Samos, Tenedos, and Lemnos. Genoa obtained these regions and islands after the Fourth Crusade and during the Latin Empire period. These here were smaller outposts used for shipping, storage, and naval repairs, each with a governor representing Genoa. Constantinople, Genoese quarter called Galata or Pera, granted after the Fourth Crusade in 1267. It became a fortified mini-city of its own, very wealthy and semi-independent in Constantinople, Galata. They controlled the trade between Mediterranean and Black Sea, and they imposed taxes. In Galata Tower, built in 1348, still dominates Istanbul's skyline today. Well, the farthest outpost Genoese was Dana in Azov, Sea of Azov. Genoese colonies along the Black Sea coasts near represent today Ukraine and Turkey. All these trade points functioned as slave markets connecting Genoa with Central Asia via caravan routes. The Genoese dealt with Tatars, Greeks, Armenians, and even Mongols. And it was like a medieval Wall Street meets the Silk Road. Acre, Antioch, Tripoli, and Beirut. After the First Crusade, Genoa gained quarters in these cities with tax exemptions and dock rights. The Genoese fleet carried pilgrims in the Holy Land, as well as crusaders and supplies for the Holy Land, but their influence declined after the fall of Acre in 1291. Let's have a look over competitors, rivalries and politics. Genoa was in fierce rivalry with Venice, another Maritime Republic, and the event culminated in the War of Georgia in 1378. Venice won the war, and Genoa's power began to fade. Genoa oscillated between independence and foreign domination by France and Spain. Despite decline, Genoa remained a merchant guild republic until 1797, when Napoleon transformed it into the Ligurian Republic. Cultural legacy. Genoa produced legendary navigators. One of the most famous, Christopher Columbus. He was originating from Genoa, born in Genoa. Next, Andrea Doria, the great admiral who modernized the Republic. Genoese architecture, cartography, and maritime law influenced Mediterranean trade for centuries. Loss of Caffa and Chios in 1475 and 1566 crippled Genoa's colonial reach. Focus shifted from trade to finance, partnering with the Spanish Empire. By the 17th century, Genoa was more of a banking powerhouse than a maritime empire. Well, this was a short journey, a historical facts journey about one of the most powerful commercial maritime empires, the Genoese Empire, Maritime Empire. Thank you very much for attending this session, and of course now it's time for you to write down some comments related to the topic, and until next time I wish you all the best. Bye bye.